Hello! Today we are going to take a look at another version of the Pliers wrench, and it is going to be the Olsa Tools, made in Germany, Pliers wrench. And as an added bonus, we're going to take a look at the Phoenix Contact tool, also made in Germany. And when we get these two next to each other, you'll probably see a family resemblance. And what I like about this family resemblance is we were testing these tools and we were finding that we were speculating that we were getting higher torques because of the different style handle. Now this isn't exponentially longer like we were seeing on some of the others, but you can see it is a little longer. So I'll be real curious to see what kind of torque we get out of these, because we were seeing so far this SK had some of the highest torque we tested, and it has these harder handles. So I'll be curious to see, with the manufacturer obviously being the same here between these two tools, it'd be interesting to see what kind of torque numbers we get when we get to that section of the testing. Okay, so let's get into these things and see what we have going. So first off, what we want to see is, let's check out how easy the button works on these. And that's something that I don't personally like, is if you can easily push the button and adjust them. We have to push in pretty far. The button's just about flush, and then the tool adjusts. So if you just kind of bump it, it's okay, but you do have to push it in pretty far. It's kind of hard to show with one finger here, but you actually have to get inside of the profile of the tool a little bit for it to adjust. I don't know if you can kind of make that out there, but just right there is flush, and I can adjust a little bit inside, and we can adjust. So that's a decent trait for the tool, because for me, I don't like it when you can accidentally bump it and make it slide real easy. Like this newer pair of Icons, you can just get on it and you can see the button is very easy to push. I don't particularly like that. Okay, so another thing I like to look at when we look at these things is how far the jaws open and are usable still. So what I mean by that is, you can open the jaws all the way, and you want to have your handles mostly closed so that you can use the wrench. If you look at this, while that is open further because of the mechanism, it's not really usable the way that is. It's going to be very hard to grab the tool like this. So let's see what our dimensions are. We have, with the handles closed all the way, we have 1 13/16, and with the handles open all the way, we get at that 2 inches that they advertise. But I don't think that's really usable. I think you're more in the 1 13/16 range, realistically 7/8. So we are recording full closed and full open, and then you can decide for the in-between yourself. Now another thing I like to look at is, what size are the jaws? So what I mean by that is, what is the overall length of the jaw and what are the width of the jaws? So if we take a look here, what is this width right here? And we're going to call that 5/16 on the upper jaw. And on our movable jaw, we have the same 5/16. This tool is of course the same, 5/16 and 5/16. This is the same pair of pliers basically, with a different handle. Now what is the overall depth of the jaw? Like, how far do you expect to be able to go in and bite on something? And I think we'll go with right here, we'll go to the radius. And that is right at 1.25 inches. See here, same thing. right at 1.25 inches. So one of the other things I like to look at, and this is purely for experimental purposes, is how big is the key in here. Some of these have a much larger key than others. These look kind of small, and I'm going to go ahead and put it at 9/32. That might be one of the smaller keys that we've had. Looking at these, yeah, both sides. So we'll go with 9/32 on the key size. One of the more fun tests is seeing how hard the pliers are, and that gives us an idea of what the jaws can take as far as when you're working with fasteners or other types of material. So let's start at an HRC 55, which has been the hardest that we've had so far, and see what happens. We are making some marks on this fixed jaw, and we are making some marks on the movable jaw, but it is largely skating. So let's see here on the movable jaw. Yeah, we're definitely making a mark on the 60. And the 60 is definitely digging in on the fixed jaw. Let's just double check the other one we have here, because we got it. Let's check it out. So 55 is definitely digging in. We'll see that in the microscope. 50 is going to skate. Yeah. 50 is easily skating on the movable jaw. And we're just digging in on that. So I'm going to go ahead and say that, yeah, 50 easily skates on both. These are about the same hardness. So they are, like many of the others that we've tested, between a 50 and 55. I'm going to say these are towards the upper end of 55, kind of like the UNIFOX was. The UNIFOX made a mark at 55, but it was trying to make a mark at 55, if that makes sense. Alright, so if you picked up a pair of these, how much weight would you be dragging around in your tool carry if you threw one of these in? So we got 15.4 ounces for the Phoenix. Now I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that the Olsa is going to be heavier, and 17.7, so you can gain quite a bit here, just about 2.5 ounces just for that fancy handle. Next up, we're going to go over to the vise with the 5/8 Allen hex on it and see if we can get 100 foot-pounds out of each of these, and see if one is easier than the other. And then we'll come back to the microscope and take a look at the jaws and see if putting 100 foot-pounds of force on something hardened does any damage. Okay, here we are over at the torque wrench, and we're going to get our pliers set up just right. And I'm not going to grip it all the way back in, but we're going to grip it most of the way in, and we're going to see if I can get to 100 foot-pounds or if this is going to want to slip off. So we're able to hold on to the handles. It didn't really want to open up, so that's good. Now let's get the Olsa to the same setting. Now we're going to go with the Olsas and go right around the same spot and see if it's easier or harder to get to that 100 foot-pounds. Here we go. So we got to the 108 warning for the torque wrench, so that wasn't too bad. I feel like it might have been a little easier with the Olsa because you have that extra surface area on the handle. Okay, and we're back from the vise. So what do we see when we take a look at these in the microscope? Do we have marking on the tool that is very clear to see, and we do have a little bit of marking right here on these, though I can just barely feel it. You can see there's an indentation there, but it's not so bad that it's really creating an issue with the tool. And on our movable jaw, there we go, barely made a mark. Now this is kind of what we saw with the UNIFOX as well. Barely made a mark on the movable jaw. It just kind of flattened the finish out a little bit. But as far as an indentation or anything that you can feel, it's just kind of smoothed off. Now let's take a look at the Olsa, which is the same pliers, and we'll start on the movable jaw, and we can see a very similar mark to the Phoenix. All I can feel is that that's smoother right there. I don't feel an indent or anything like that. It's just more polished. I wouldn't say polished because it force applied it, but I don't feel an indent from that. Now when we get to our fixed jaw, we can see the same basic little bit of a notch there. Now I didn't want to quite do that right where we did. I wanted to have the Allen up here more. I'll pay attention in future, but we actually had reduced surface area here, so there's a little bit more force applied, but even still, I can sort of feel that, but it's not really bad. There you get a good angle. You can just see there's a little bit of a lip, and we're really magnifying in there, so not too bad. Looking at the overall tool, you can see there's your laser etching. That sort of stuff wears off. There's your made in Germany. There's your 2-inch, they claim. Here's your laser etched SAE sizes on it. And your handle. It's just your typical rubberized handle. We've seen that style of texture before on things. The only thing different here on the Phoenix is your dipped handle. You can see that. And this is it's not super gummy, but it's got some grip to it. And here you can see a little bit more of the handle, the way it's made. So you're made in Germany. This one has the Phoenix Contact laser etched in it, where this one doesn't have anything laser etched in that location. They didn't brand it with for Olsa there, they just went with the handles. So kind of interesting to look at. Okay, welcome back over to the load cell vise, and what we're gonna do is get this set up with our Phoenix contact pair of pliers, and we're going to get it set up that it is right at the end of travel, and then we're going to set it up that we're all the way back, and we'll get our pressure and our measurements in those positions. So I like to have the handles so that they're at a comfortable setting, that we don't have to really struggle to do anything with the tool, and I feel as though this is a realistic test when we do it this way. So I can see that the way the handle is made, it might sit a little weird, but we're going to go and get this thing set to input of 5. There we go. Input of 5. Now we just need to see what our measurement is. And our vise jaw is right at 2 7/16. So now we're going to go ahead, crank this up to 75 and see what we get. Now I'll be curious to see how close we are with this between the two pliers, because I think the Olsa is going to sit differently on the vise. So there we go. I overwent just a little bit, but we're right at 75 with 457. Okay, let's take our measurement again, and we are right at 1 and 13/16. Now we're going to slide this back to the rear position. We're going to do the same thing, same exact test. We're going to go to 5-ish. 5 is right around 50. And what do I measure here? Still 2 and 9/16. And let's go to 75. So we're reasonably close between the two here. So I'm going to say that's 475. What do we measure? We're right on 2, so we've gone down 9/16. Okay, so now we're going to go with the Olsa, and I'll be curious to see. I know by hand I feel like I have more torque because of that larger surface area that we talked about. But we were also speculating that these plastic handles tend to give you a little bit more leverage because they overhang the tool more than the rubber ones. So let's see what we get when we get to 5 at the tip, right around 40. 540. We are 2 and 5/8, so pretty similar so far. Let's go up to 75. It's going to be a little over. So we're almost right at the numbers for the high numbers for the Phoenix with the low numbers for the Olsa. So that's interesting. So we got 475 where we had, oh, we got to get our dimensions. Let me get back to that. Alright, and what do we measure? 2, right on 2. Alright, so now let's get this and slide it all the way back in the jaw and see what our 5 gets us now. Right on 5. That's quite low compared. Let's just check our load cell. We're not super far off. Okay. Sometimes this can creep a little and you got to reset it. Alright, let's get in there to 5. So not a lot of tension. You can see the tool's actually kind of floating in the jaws. So 5 is 40, and we'll call it 2 5/8 again. And let's go up to 75. I have a feeling this is going to be a little higher. Oh yeah. So we overdid it just a little, but it'll probably sink in. Yeah, it's backing down a little. So that was a decent jump. We'll call it 515 because I went over a little. So that's really interesting, the difference between these handles and not these handles. And we're at 2 1/8. How far we've gone in. Interesting. So there we have it. That was some interesting results. It wasn't the highest results we got by any means for either of these, but here we have basically identical pliers, and you can see the handles do stick out a little bit further on the over molded handles than they do on the rubberized handles. So that little bit extra, even in the vise, got us a little bit more torque. So that's an interesting observation. And I guess I shouldn't say really torque. We're measuring the compressional load of the tool with this load cell. So we can get better compression with the handles, which in theory should equate to less likelihood of slipping. And then we also have the width of the handles here, significantly different. The width of the Phoenix is right around 1/2 inch, and at the widest spot the Olsa is right around 7/8 on that side and right around 1 inch on the thicker side of where your hand is going to be. So now you're talking about literally doubling the surface area of the handle, and that should feel better in the hand and allow you to even push harder. When we were at the other vise with the 5/8 hex, I found it way easier to get up to that 100 foot-pounds with this pair of pliers than I did with this one. Neither slipped, so we didn't have that issue that we saw with these cheapy vice grip pliers, that we couldn't even hold onto these. They wanted to open up as we were forcing. I think we could only get to 70 some foot-pounds. We couldn't exert up to 100 foot-pounds, which is one of our tests that we like to see. Hey, can I get up to 100 foot-pounds with this wrench without it slipping? So interesting. I think should be pretty obvious that these other handles would obviously be more comfortable. But what I think is interesting is that even in the load cell vise, these over molded handles, being that they're just a little bit longer, we're eking out a little bit more compression force even in the load cell vise. So that's pretty consistent with what we've been seeing elsewhere, and I think that's really interesting. So let me know your thoughts below in the comments what you think. The Olsa, I guess we didn't mention this, the Olsa retails for around $60 online, and the Phoenix, I got a deal on this, but it averages around 80. I paid about the same for both of them, but the Phoenix, I see it for sale averaging around 80. So all being said, this costs more than this. I would say between these two, I would definitely go with the Olsa. For the price point though, the Olsa is right around the price that you can pick up this UNIFOX if you're looking for a deal on it. And I don't think there's really a whole lot of a comparison here. They do both have that made in Germany quality. The jaws are about equally as hard. I think the UNIFOX is right on that upper end of the 55, just like these were, but I think hands down for the price point of what these costs, I would go with the Knipex. The Phoenix, if you get it for $80, I think you overpaid for a Pliers wrench. You could easily go spend less for the Knipex and I think get a superior wrench. So interesting taking a look at these. I think this has been a fun series to really look at things and compare them. There's not a lot of information out on these things that I was able to find, so there's hopefully some points that you can look at and see some data on, hey, what are these, what are they not. If you can get a deal on the Olsa that it's on sale below $60, it might be a good tool to pick up. If you can get this Phoenix lower, I would say you can. You know, it's not a bad tool either, but I don't think I'd pay the $80 for this, and I don't know that I'd want to pay the $60 for the Olsa, knowing that I could probably get the Knipex for that money. As far as what quality they are standing alone, I think they're decent build quality. I don't think there's really a whole lot wrong with them tool-wise, manufacturing-wise. They have this, I think some of the European tools have started going with this kind of silvery, I think even Knipex might have some that have this finish. It's something to get used to. It's not bad. I don't know how it will wear long-term, but it's not a bad tool finish. The quality of the tool itself, the handles, the operation, the push button, everything is what you would expect from German quality. It is not by any means a junky tool, but I think for money, if we go back to that, I would stick with the Knipex. Let me know your thoughts below. Do you have either of these? Do you like them? Have you had any problems with them? Do these handles work loose on the Olsa? That's a concern that I always have with these overmolded handles, is I've had some tools with them in the past and they can work loose sometimes. So that's something to be aware of. I'm not going to say that it will happen. I haven't had it happen on these with the very limited use that I've given them. But if you have them and it happened to you, I would really like to know in the comments below to help other people out. So as always, thanks for watching, and have a great day.